And I think we're live. Welcome to the AI across the PDM AI across the product lifecycle podcast. A bit of a mouthful. This is your host, Michael Finicaro, and I'm so happy to have Karan Talati and Michael Corr, respectively, of First Resonance and Duro. It's going to be really exciting to hear about them. Let's get an intro from Karan first, maybe. He's got a coffee cup. I guess it'll be Michael.
Fantastic. Yeah. Taking small sips. Hi, Michael and Michael. Speaking to two Michaels this morning. So fantastic to be on. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm Karan Talati, CEO and co-founder of First Resonance. At First Resonance, we are building a factory operating system now powering something between 50 and 60 companies in mission critical industries and quality critical industries, such as aerospace, energy, defense tech, robotics. My background comes from a mix of hardware and software, mechanical engineer by academic background, and morphed into making sure the right information moves from various parts of traditionally disconnected operations back at SpaceX. I would say a very fertile ground for applying innovative technology, especially given all of these changes going on in the world with supply chain, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and aerospace. Excited to share some of those learnings and what we're doing here at First Resonance.
Awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. Just to the audience, I am monitoring LinkedIn. So if you want to put your questions in the chat, I will ask Michael and Karan as we're going. Michael, why don't you tell us about what you do at the awesome stuff at Duro?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Always good to see both of you guys. Michael Corr, co-founder and CEO of Duro. So we're a cloud and AI native PLM, product lifecycle management. And what differentiates us is really our view and embracing of the cultural shift that's happened in the hardware industry, where there's a more progressive and fast-paced mentality, where more and more hardware engineers are actually very versed in software development, and they look to adopt software development best practices into their hardware team development. And so we practice more agile approaches, more plug and play, out of the box capabilities, very API first approach to managing data. And our vision is really, how can we establish that digital thread across all the different data resources, the inputs and the outputs that are needed to design and manufacture your product? And how do we let engineers be engineers and not administrators to the data?
That's awesome. I still have an echo on my side. Are you guys hearing an echo? It's very strange. I've got echo cancellation on, but it's still... Not you?
What if I try to... If that helps, let me know.
Now we don't hear you. Oh, that's a little better. Yeah, I don't hear any more echo. So I wanted to break up this interview kind of in two parts, because what's really hard, of course, right now is to separate the hype from the reality with AI, right? And so I know both of you guys are really smart, and I know that you used AI in the conception and in the actual product itself. And I'd like to understand first, like, what was your perception of AI before you even started? You probably already had used it with ChatGPT, or maybe you had a background with ML and AI even before the OpenAI kind of burst the bubble on that. But what could you guys give me an idea? Like, what was your perception of AI before? Or did you see it as like, oh my God, or you were like, well, maybe it's a... Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's definitely evolved quite a bit. When AI started becoming into the mainstream, I took a wait and see approach. I wasn't quite sure where it was going to land. I think the technology itself was really mostly concentrated in like the early adopters. And so I think there was still some speculation about its maturity or how dependable it could be to actually incorporating into a business. We weren't against it or anything, but I think we were just kind of sitting on the sidelines.
Standoffish?
Yeah, just kind of letting it happen. We had our own business to take care of and plenty of features to focus on and great customers to work with. And so there wasn't really much demand. But actually, for me personally, I actually had this, aha moment where I guess this is maybe a year and a half ago or so. I was at a conference about AI for startups, and lots of people were talking about how AI technologies were helping them build companies, not so much just in putting AI into their products. And that's where I had this huge aha moment. AI was allowing startups to move at an order of magnitude faster than their predecessors, like us included. Like we started our company in 2018. And so first I was inspired. It's like, oh my gosh, we got to get our team to start using AI into their daily, best practices. marketing and sales and everything. But then I had a fear moment. I don't know if we're allowed to curse on this podcast, but I was like, oh, F, if we don't embrace this, our competitors will. Right. And that was really the fire under our butt that was like, okay, this is real now. And someone with a similar concept, idea, or vision as Duro starting today, and this was, I think, 2024, could catch up to us at a much faster pace than we had, in our own journey. And that's what really was the motivating factor. And I literally raced back to the office, went on Slack. I knew a couple people in our team had been poking around with AI tools to help them with their day-to-day. I kind of got everyone together and started like our own Slack support group. Be like, okay, everybody's using AI. We don't care if it's ChatGPT, Anthropic. Pick your tool of choice. Let's help each other, learn from each other. How can we make our own productivity better embracing AI technology? And that was really the pivotal moment. And now it's ubiquitous. It's a must-have at our company.
Is that the same thing that you experienced?
I definitely have had a lot of the experiences that Michael just shared. I'll add a little bit of a hybrid experience as well. So stepping back many years, Michael, you touched on, coming from an AI ML background. That's exactly what I was doing before AI. And now when we say AI in 2025, really people are focused on LLMs, large language models, and that's how we think about AI. But AI has been around for decades, right? Research being done in the 70s. And really, actually, one of the interesting things is there's kind of this counterintuitive perception where people think that AI is more advanced than machine learning, ML. It's not. The definition of it is just human-like kind of behavior, which, you could do in many ways. But no doubt, large language models are very impressive. So going back, my experience, I kind of always knew it was inevitable. I spent a few years at SpaceX working on the data pipelines that allowed us to compare operational data to manufacturing data. And there's definitely AI functionality, machine learning tools that we used in that for anomaly detection and some of these advanced algorithms. So even beyond SpaceX and some of those like more stochastic and statistical kind of approaches, I actually ended up at a machine learning company doing some of the same things where we were analyzing a broad set of data, correlating that data, creating training sets, et cetera. So I kind of knew it was inevitable. I will admit, though, in 2023, when the world experienced the ChatGPT moment, I was also taken aback in that. I didn't realize just how advanced LLM research had gotten and how quickly it would move from research into commercial applications that OpenAI made possible just through a simple text box. But even still today, we think about just how amazing that is. And when we have these moments, right, the internet, mobile, and now I think LLMs being available for the broader public, it's pretty profound. Ever since then, we've taken shots on goal here at First Resonance. I would say we're in our third era almost of using AI in the product. And I will admit the first two were failed attempts. The first one was simply trying to wrap it like ChatGPT like everybody else was. We put very minimal resources behind that because we had already caught on to this early kind of downplay of AI and being a ChatGPT wrapper. It wasn't going to go far, and it definitely wasn't going to go far in manufacturing. Right. In 2024, there was some hype behind fine-tuning models, and we actually did expend good engineering effort behind there. Ultimately, the industry arrived at that being a dead end as well. But it wasn't until 2025, this year, where I think a lot of things started to change. And I think we'll talk about that in a moment here. But both inside the business, how we use AI, like Michael said, across sales, marketing, and of course, software development, which might be, again, one of these ironic places that AI is the most disruptive. And of course, now embedding it into the product, making it available for manufacturers. Going after manufacturing and serving manufacturers, we're just naturally going to be we're going to have to be patient, let's say, because they're not necessarily the earliest adopters.
That's really well said. It makes me think, like, it was kind of shocking to see ChatGPT with just that little interface, which is a text box. It's sort of like the same revolution that Google did, right? Just with one line, and that line changed everything. Like when you simplify it, it's just a good lesson in UX, right? If you simplify it and it does the one thing it's supposed to do, then it's probably it's gonna work. And it's interesting you mentioned the development thing, because of course we're seeing all this stuff about vibe coding and of course lovable things. So you just do a line of text and suddenly you've got a fully working app covering every possible corner case. Well, probably not, because I played with that too. So what was your experience in using AI to develop the product? Not let's talk after that about AI inside the product, but how did you approach it? Did you try vibe coding? Was it just, do you have an assistant and you were just using it to paste your documentation? How are you using it how are the developers of Duro using it to develop this new version of Duro that's AI based?
Multiple facets. I think it's really dependent on the task at hand. I'd say we did do some vibe coding, which allowed us to do some rapid prototyping. It wasn't intentionally, it allowed us to do things we hadn't done before, to kind of how to thought it was like a skunkworks team where they could vibe code to mock some new features, quickly stand it up. You didn't have to have high quality code behind it, but it was able to at least portray our vision for what the product was to be, and we can put it in front of prospects and customers and say, how does this fit? Once we and iterate immediately on that, right, and have a pretty powerful product. And then once we learn from that experience in those user interviews, we take the best of that product and put it into our main product. And in that case, it was a combination of traditional coding styles, but also using AI really to do, the grunt work, I'll say. What AI is very good at, honestly, is brainstorming. You're thinking of ideas like, here's how I'm thinking about modeling this or architecting this feature. It certainly, with a history of, dozens of developers over Duro's career working on the code base, it's very hard for an individual to have a firm understanding of the entire code base. And so AI is a very good assistant at asking it questions. Hey, dig into this feature for me. Give me a summary of how it's implemented, so that I can continue that design pattern. I can build on top of it. I don't break any established, architectures, right? So that's.
And you were using this inside of Microsoft Code, or
I think every developer, is free to use their own IDE. I think we've all gravitated to Cursor and using Claude. We found that for code development, that is the most reliable. But I personally, I think they're all leapfrogging each other. So maybe another AI tool would be better. But
yeah,
we're reasonably agnostic to it. I think for that part, because you can establish, certainly with Claude, you can establish your Claude at MD files so that everyone is at least using the same types of prompts and is picking up the same design patterns. Developers are free to use their own development environment, whatever they.
Very cool.
So, but there is, another thing that honestly, what it allowed us to do is certainly me. So, obviously as a founder, I was the lead product manager, the visionary for this whole company to begin with. And we now have a larger team that assists with that. And so my background, I didn't mention at the top of the call, I'm actually a double ECS. And so, I've programmed my career, but as I've migrated to more managerial responsibilities, I've gotten further and further away from code. And I don't claim to be current. And so at some times, as a product manager, you dive into writing user stories and acceptance criteria and what have you, but there's still room for interpretation mistakes, and you lose some cycles because the developer or it wasn't clear, or even you weren't quite sure how the feature would need to be implemented until you saw it in your hands. And so what AI did is actually empowered me as a product manager. Now I could actually write code, production code, because, for those reasons I explained, as a product manager, the more complex business logic ideas, certainly, the common fit functionality, I leave to the rest of the developers, and some other advanced things. I don't want to, discredit that. But there are some more advanced, like PLM specific business ideas that I wouldn't expect someone who didn't have the same history in the industry as I did to understand it. And so it empowered me as a product manager to actually build the feature and iterate faster, because then I can have it in front of me and I can play with it and be like, yes, this is right, or no, this isn't right. And it saved me so much time from writing exhaustive user stories and acceptance criteria, and then also having those feedback loops. And so that is something how I also became more productive as a product manager.
I think on a separate discussion, Michael, you mentioned that the original Duro took 3 or 4 years to make, and then the AI version using what you knew, but you still got the development time to 6 months or something like that, which is astounding. Karan, did you have a similar experience at First Resonance? And you said you did 2 first attempts and then a third attempt. Was the third attempt better because of AI, or?
Yeah, so well, just sticking to using AI for development, I would say all this has really picked up in the last 6 to 12 months across the entire industry. So I'll come back to those,
Right.
those examples of our first, second, and third wave in building AI into the product. But I echo everything that Michael just mentioned. I actually forgot, Michael and I know each other well, and I actually forgot that, Michael, you have a CS background. I think, both of us in what we have to do on a day-to-day has now gone on to other things, including myself. So, just to add a few pieces to this, I view everything going on, and I think we live in an amazing time, but we have been, frankly, from my perspective, for decades. And we've lived through the internet and so many of these things that are happening, and I don't have to account for them all. But right now, in this moment, with respect to using AI to write code, I view this as a natural progression to everything that's been happening for 20 years, right? It used to be that you used to have a computer science degree. I mean, and I'm even starting at like the era of the PC, right? Then all of a sudden, all these coding boot camps sprang up. They went online. You could learn this stuff online. And as a practicing software developer, just about somewhere between 5 and 10 years ago, the truth of the matter is most software developers, they're not writing algorithms from scratch and from their brain. They're often Googling around. They often end up on Stack Overflow. They copy paste code.
Stack
Exactly
Overflow.
right. They copy paste code right into the code base. So some of the challenges that people are bringing up even today with respect to the quality of vibe coding, and things like that. We've had these challenges, and we always seem to figure it out. So what copy pasting Stack Overflow code into developing a unit testing framework is the same thing here with respect to, hey, you can't just vibe code slop, right? That is what the people say. The people who are really leveraging these tools now understand that AI, writing code and generating code for end application, is just one of the many uses of AI. Using AI to write unit tests, using AI to explore the code base, like Michael said, using AI to rapidly iterate on specs, right? Again, connecting the user stories, the user intent with what exists in the code base. Product managers did not have that access up until just recently. You'd have to come from the code base.
Super
So
powerful.
it's exciting. There are challenges, but like with any technology, learning how to use the technology in its fullest form is way better than dismissing it just because the one-shot attempt doesn't work well.
What I equate AI to right now for code development it's I have two young kids, a 6 and 8-year-old. I feel like it's a 6-year-old. It's old enough to do some things independently. You can give it some instructions and it'll, for most of the part, complete them. But it gets distracted by some shiny things and some new toys. It'll start diverging from what the original objective was, and sometimes even contradict itself within 10 minutes of the conversation. So it's not clear. It's not like a set and forget type of tool. You can't just say, build me an app that does this and go get some coffee and come back and it's done. And so you really still, if it's meant to be production product and not just some throwaway experiment, absolutely, you still have to be in there and still have to be a talented developer and understand what it's doing, so you can course correct it or evaluate it, to make sure that it is still consistent with your own objectives.
That's a great point, because I think there's a lot of this stupid scare mythology of, the developer is obsolete. It's not true. You absolutely have to have development skills, and there's no way you're going to build software without solid development.
What I do feel though is to kind of pick up on what you said, Michael, is we, over the course of Duro in my own career, I've leveraged offshore junior level contractors and developers, because there's a place for it and a value for it. But I do feel that these AI tools are going to absolutely replace that industry, because you can generate equivalent quality code of these, offshore or, low budget development chop shops with an AI chatbot. And that industry, I think, is going to go away. But you still need to have the experienced manager or the architect, know how to guide the tool and evaluate its development.
But before we get to the second part, Karen, you were going to talk about those first two attempts and then the third success.
So and Michael, I want to make sure that I answer the part of it. Like, really, what I was referring to is us building AI for our end customers and into the product. So we've had kind of 3 eras of this, right? The first one was the 2023. We should probably look at this. It's going to be important. What is now in retrospect called the ChatGPT wrapper era. Definitely untenable, useless, the list kind of goes on of adjectives that I could throw on it for end applications for manufacturing, right? An LLM is trained on so many points. And actually back then in 2023, you're thinking about, GPT 3.5 and 4 was arriving.
Yeah.
Useless for our end application but you know what it did do was it got our wheels turning on what would eventually become the 2025 and I hope kind of further extension the 2024 era. Some tool sets became available. The industry started working on fine tuning these models and applying weights and using the models to so these LLMs to solve end customer problems. The problem with that was the fine tuning. The effort was so high to get a marginal gain on what you were trying to do. So at that time, we were trying to go for a very low barrier to entry, something that we believe that the AI could get right more reliably. So rather than something like, hey, detect this quality nonconformance on my manufactured product, we were just looking for it to be an assistant to writing queries against our API. Because we had a good understanding that like these LLMs were going to be better at writing code than they were going to be at solving these problems, or at least let's give it a shot. Again, the second wave, I would say, generally failed because the effort for fine tuning these models was so high relative to the gain.
So
But
hard.
2025, I would say like there was definitely this moment in March that I think will go down as a similar moment as January 2023.
GPT-5 moment.
It would actually be the MCP moment, the Model Context Protocol moment.
Oh, okay.
So this
Of course,
protocol
yeah.
already existed from
Anthropic.
Anthropic, exactly right. But it was, I think, the second version of the spec, which really made it a lot more available, established the protocol, and everybody in the industry started rallying around it. It was, in AI, people are calling MCP the USB-C for AI, right? And I think that it was just like USB-C,
Right.
it went through A, micro, and a few iterations until it got to USB-C. AI has had its various kind of interface levels. And I think it was MCP Protocol 2 or version 2 that allowed the industry to rally around. You got all these tools. Now you have all these agent orchestration services that what we looked at actually just recently, the same application that I was mentioning that we tried for in 2024, what took us probably 2 months to get a marginal, sometimes works type of application, we were able to do in 2 days using MCP and these agent orchestration services. It's phenomenal what's going on, and we're in the midst of it right now.
Thank you, Karan. That's awesome. I wanted to shift it now to like how you're putting AI into your two respective products, because I think that's another thing. It's nice to talk about it, but how is it used concretely? And James White in the chat, and this kind of relates to, is talking about AI as a probabilistic model, and we're in a very deterministic world of manufacturing. Close isn't good enough, right? If you get the wrong biome item, it's not going to work, and you're not going to be able to produce it with first residence. So how do we get to deterministic results, and how are you using it in the product to obviously reduce the risk of hallucinations and increase the productivity, right? Michael, maybe you start.
Yeah, happy to. We're using AI, for our customer-facing features kind of across the spectrum. But what we do, the kind of lens we look at is, is it just like a fluffy, froofy, kind of feature that really has no value, or is there actually meat to it? And so the lens we look through is, if you look back at what PLM is, PLM by definition is the aggregation of multiple data sets coming from multiple teams. You got engineering, electrical, mechanical, procurement, manufacturing, QA, whatever it may be. In the world we live in, it's not uncommon to have these teams scattered across the world, different departments, different cultures, different languages, different vernacular. And so historically, PLM has always, had that burden of trying to transpose the data from those natural positions into a central repository before you can start processing and make value. And that's put a lot of pressure on the PLM or the integration providers or whatever it may be. And so AI completely removed that dependency, because one of the things that AI excels at is being able to process data in its natural format. And so now that's relaxed that burden of trying to create all these interlocking transposition algorithms to translate mechanical data into a PLM and electrical data Chinese language and English language all into one format before it could be processed. Now we can leave it as it is. And really the burden is more on just that digital thread. Like, how do we make sure that our AI tools have access to the content? It can choose to leave it in its local repository or migrate it, but the point is it doesn't have to transposition it before it can create value. And so that's kind of the main lens we looked at in how do we add, value to features. And one of the, the critical areas where we do is things like the change orders, right? So change orders is where all the teams kind of come together to that watering hole and discuss what's happening. How does it impact each other? Whether the change order is initiated from an engineering team or manufacturing team, often a good company will have all of them at least have visibility into the change, and they can voice their opinion about its impact on them. And so again, AI does a lot of that, we'll call it presents the data in a silver platter to the team. Like, we're not in the position right now to process it per se, because there's a lot of context we don't have access to, like to judge, is this the right change or not? But we can analyze the facts. What has changed? Who changed it? Is it similar to another change? What did we learn from that previous change? Can we use those same learnings to this one? So that when the team comes in to formally review it and approve or reject it, they have a lot of that burden taken care of for them, right? That grunt work, right? Quickly, change orders as a pinnacle event, and the legacy products certainly that I've used in my career just do so much work as an analyst, as a reviewer, to understand what happened in that change. I'm oversimplifying, but often two things would happen. I'd either just rubber stamp it and say, yeah, I know that engineer, he's smart, I'm sure it's fine. At which point I had no real value in the change order process. Or I'd have to budget time in my day and roll up my sleeves and go dig down and look at the original CAD models and do my own manual comparisons and ask questions and do a proper thorough review. But then that could take days or weeks. And so we took the approach of how do we combine those two, where all that grunt work is done by our AI tools so that one can come in and with a minimal amount of time in an educated manner actually do the equivalent time period of a rubber stamp.
How about you, Karan? How did that work out for First Resonance? And the third invocation,
right.
obviously.
And I would definitely say that we are finally in the generation of the iterations where it's going to work. I can say that confidently now. But Michael, you asked a few good questions in kind of lead up. You asked about, or at least kind of characterizing what you said. You mentioned we live in a deterministic world in manufacturing, and AI is probabilistic, and that stuck out to me. This could get philosophical or esoteric, but I challenge some of the premise. I think we want to, in manufacturing, live in a very deterministic world. The reality is the world, and including manufacturing operations, are probabilistic. A lot of the specs that we have that we take as canonized material properties were actually recorded after through a whole bunch of empirical testing in the 1960s during the Apollo era, right? You hit this material 60,000 times. Okay, that's the hardness value. You go run that test again, and this is, coming from the SpaceX experience and background, I gained a huge appreciation for, going down to the physics, asking about the first principles, and frankly, we did recharacterize a lot of material properties. So redefining physics. So take that kind of esoteric leap forward.
Nice.
What I'll say is it's very important to build trust with your end customer, and AI is just a tool. You could say this about automation overall. One of the reasons that we have made it such an important point at First Resonance to use AI inside of our business is for every single person here to gain an appreciation for the UX that's required for them to build trust, and the UX that actually allows for that. So take some of these really small UX elements that I think companies like Cursor or OpenAI or Anthropic have rolled out that have developed trust with engineers. Like one example, a very simple one, Cursor, by embedding the AI into an IDE. Again, we were talking about the text box being a profound kind of democratization and making it available to everybody. Putting AI inside of an IDE is that same effect for engineers and developers. And counterintuitively, engineers don't love change, actually, right? There's kind of this stereotype that engineers are chasing the latest technology and all that, but rightfully so. Engineers can be skeptical. They want to make sure that things are production ready, trustworthy, high quality before falling into a lot of pain of iteration. So this was, I think, an evolution. You're not copy pasting code from ChatGPT into your traditional IDE. You have the AI inside of the context of the IDE. So I bring that up to say, while I do believe that we live in a very probabilistic world, it is important for us to develop deep trust with manufacturing customers. And the way that we're approaching it at First Resonance is, okay, let's meet in the middle. Let us help you find what you probably missed in your initial review of a quality nonconformance or work instruction, right? Let us surface these things that are more like anomaly detection, or hey, did you check this, or here's a recommendation, rather than make the claim and apply AI incorrectly in some cases, where we claim to automatically resolve an issue ticket end to end. We are far from that, not necessarily because we have all the data, but because I think it's important for us to deploy these things that say, hey, this issue might be related, or you've solved these problems 10 times in the past. Take a look here and accelerate the workflow. If it's wrong, the cost isn't that high. People aren't losing trust. But over time, the more we understand how right the AI is, the more we can actually take more bets and say, hey, we think that this is the recommended resolution to this issue. But I think, again, it's super important to not just to leap forward and be 80% correct. I think it's important to say, hey, you probably missed fastening that bolt, which is all too real of an example. In manufacturing, things are not perfect. And there are too many stories here in the past few years, past many decades, where mistakes do get made. And guess what? AI wasn't around to make those mistakes. It was humans making those mistakes. How can we team up with AI to reduce those mistakes is really what we're focused on.
So I don't know if you guys saw that. I know, PTC killed LiveWorks, so we don't get to hear the talks anymore. But Aora Berry, who runs for PTC now, he gave a speech in Salt Lake City at an event they called Fast and Furious, because I asked him, about what their strategy was. And he had this thing for agents, the agency of an agent, where you've got an assist. I'm sorry, you have advise. So I'm just going to find the information, the contextual information, which you were talking about. Assist, maybe you do one task. You're not allowed to do more than one. I'm going to make sure I agree with you, and then I let the AI do it. And then there's automate. Here's 3 or 4 tasks. Here's a workflow. So in the closing part of this part of the interview was about, what is your opinion of AI today? So maybe we can frame it in, do you think we're well past the advice and we're heading towards assist, and that we'll get to automate within X amount of time? Or do you think there's not enough experience and there's not enough doubt in the agent today? Because I think what we're missing is an agent that says, I don't believe you. Wait a second, go back and check that again. You know what I mean? Just to the other agents. Maybe we need a committee of agents or something. So I just want to know, what you guys have worked with it a lot more than I have, because you've developed software. So how has your opinion changed? You started with, this is interesting. Michael, you said, well, this is cool and we got to do it because we're going to be killed otherwise. Karan, you said, I used it already and I'd like to see it in my product. So how is your perception today, and heading towards the end of 2025? What's your perception now? And in the framework of, is AI already past that advise and heading elsewhere? Go ahead. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, it's good. I like that 3A thing. I'll look up, see if I can find that talk.
I'll send you I'll put the URL in the link.
Yeah, that's a great framework. So I had a slightly similar but different approach. I saw it, this is admittedly oversimplifying it, but I saw AI as really two sides, the same coin, the generation side and the analysis side. And so it's either generating content or it's analyzing content. And I personally, certainly through our experience at Duro and what we focused on, generative stuff is cool, like no doubt, right? Like I play with ChatGPT with my kids, and they get to imagine a picture, and they, draw me a picture of a girl on a unicorn with puppies in her hand. And 30 seconds has got this amazing picture, and the quality of those pictures have gotten incredibly better over the last year or so. Now the child doesn't have 6 fingers, it actually has 5.
I knew you were going to say that.
But it's still, in my opinion, certainly from what I see, the generative side is still nascent. I think people enjoy it and it's fun, and it's certainly more mature in some areas than others, but you can immediately tell, it's AI generated and there might be some hallucinations, or you just have to double, triple check it. So we've really been focusing on the analysis side. How do we use AI to analyze existing data? So you're building on top of facts. I have this data, right? I have this information, I have this bill of materials, I have these change orders, I have these events, I have these comments. How can I learn from all that disparate information and generate better value or better intelligence for the engineering team from it, right? Engineering teams and companies over the course of the histories, there's all this, what's referred to as tribal knowledge. People know things, they don't always document it. We're humans, we get lazy. I'm sure, Karan, you see this with your customers. There's someone who's on the actual shop floor. The work instructions didn't say to tighten the bolt to 10 torque newtons, but they did, and they forgot to write it down. So the next person doesn't know that it has to be a 10 torque newtons, right? So there's missing information, or maybe they wrote it on a little piece of paper or their own little personal notes. So how do we use AI and the digital thread aspect of it to facilitate accessing all that information, and then using AI to generate reports? So that's how we focus on our perspective, and what we think is more mature is the analytics side.
Well, the advice, basically. So you don't trust it to work on its own yet. But okay. And how about you,
look,
Karan?
I love that framework, so I'm also intrigued to take a look at that talk. Looking forward to getting that from you, Michael. But one word that I have used, it also happens to start with an A, so maybe we could get this in as the fourth A, is augmentation. and I really do believe that, set AI aside for a moment, in manufacturing and in hardware, we've always been stuck in this binary between doing it manually and automating it. And there's a lot of stories that Elon Musk has talked about experiences at Tesla of over automating things, and I experienced that at SpaceX as well. Why is this important? It is such a heavy lift to implement things like advanced robotics, AR, VR, and all these promises of Industry 4.0. They're very limited to like the innovation center in a lot of operations, or very well capitalized top tier factories where you get to do that stuff. Everything else, the 95% of other factories that exist in the world, I mean, you will find a very opposite view of what advanced manufacturing looks like that powers the world around us. I think AI opens up this opportunity of augmenting the human, and we're not stuck in this binary between, do we do it manually or do we invest in this very high overhead automation scheme, right? It's democratized, it's relatively cheap. To get these answers and to take these actions. One thing I'll point out, I actually don't believe that this framework that you described is a temporal one, where like we're on some sort of phase or arc of, we're in the advise phase and we'll eventually get to the automate phase. I think just as humans interact with one another, all of these are going to be important. There will always be a time where somebody wants to do an analysis but not affect the system. And there will be a time that people are eager to take automated actions when the models are sufficiently progressed. And I think we're getting there very quickly. One peculiarity that I noticed in every AI tool, for the most part, that we use at First Resonance, whether that's for development, for generation of prototypes, and including in kind of go-to-market operations, I noticed a small hint over the past few months, tool that, gave this AI co-pilot capability inside of it. All of them over time provided more knobs for how to use AI. So they provide a drop down. Do you want to ask, or do you want to take action? Which model do you want to use? So very interestingly, I think in the past 12, 24 months, rather than this kind of omni-model LLM approach where, 4.0 is going to solve everything and now 5 is the omni-model, every single one of these application layers has exposed, do you want to use Opus 4.1 from Anthropic, or do you want to use GPT 4.1? So people are getting even smarter about using models because the models have different outcomes, just like any tool. Do you want to use a scientific calculator, a graphing calculator, or do you want to run a full FEA analysis? Right? For those hardware people on the call, AI is the same way. Do you want to affect just this function with 4.1? Do you want to refactor your own, like the whole code base completely, people say unhinged AI, right? Just go nuts. Just go slashing him through my code base with Opus 4.1. Do you want to ask? Do you want to analyze? Do you want to automate? We're going to see the same thing in manufacturing. And I think it's up to companies like Duro and First Resonance to make these things familiar, recognizable to manufacturers. What does this mean for your application, right? Do you want to automatically close this issue, or do you just want to understand which issues you've come across in the past? So it's all about pattern matching.
So let's move. We've only got we're about 3/4 of the way through the call. I know Michael's got a hard stop. I wanted to understand, now you've sold this product into the real world. And so you go into, we don't have to name the companies obviously, but you go into company X, and perhaps you were able to perceive on a scale of 1 to 5, where they were in their digital maturity roadmap, 1 being email and Excel, and 5 being a fully automated agentic digital twin, which nobody is doing. Basically, there's no company that's at 5, probably 2 or 3 companies at 4, maybe. So, where do you perceive when the rubber hits the road, you install this? Do you get an idea of where companies are? And because you guys will each get 5 minutes to respond. When you put in your solution, is there a ripple effect where the company says, wow, if I was smarter about how I manage data, and I had a chief data officer, and I had data stewards to make sure everything was aligned and there was data quality, then I could get so much more out of this whole thing? Or was it just in a bubble and they did the one project and that was it? So I would like to know, how do we, to get a kind of a feel of what's happening in the real world with AI, and if it's hype or we're starting to see the industry moving in that direction. Since you got to go first, you get to go first.
I would say that the problem isn't unique to AI. I think as we talked about and Karan brought up at the top of the call, our industry is going through its own cultural shift right now. There is, I have my own theories on how it happened, but there is really a bimodal cultural effect that's happening where there's an older generation that grew up with in the 80s and 90s of those technologies, learned those, and now you have a newer generation. There wasn't a continuous, ingress of culture that kind of smooth out these bumps. It really is two cultural, they're not clashing, the two cultural experiences and how they focus with technology. And so it's the latter, the more or less the younger, more progressive generation that really understands what we're doing immediately. And they're already doing something like it. We're finding more and more hardware companies, we go into their office and they've already built something, prototyped it themselves, because of that same factor. Like the legacy products in our product category didn't do what they wanted to do, or at least it wasn't even a cultural match to what they're looking at. They're looking at these interfaces like, I don't know what these are. And so they would, again, they're more empowered now and capable of building their own tools. So they often would have some type of, hokey, but some type of PLM or revision management tool. And then they see Duro like, oh, this is exactly what we've been looking for. Thank you. We don't need to build it ourselves anymore. And so for that, that's independent of AI. It's just the more progressive software API first approach, out of the box capabilities that's more akin to like a software infrastructure, like it's infrastructure as code, right? Where when you're managing your AWS environment, you can use code to configure it. You don't need to go into you don't need to go into the interface to do all the connections and tweak all the configuration. Same thing with Duro. And so that's predominantly who we attract as customers. The customers are already looking for that and they understand that mentality and that approach. And so in those cases, it's more of just like thank you. We didn't have to develop this ourselves. We're now aware that this product exists, and they kind of continue with their course of business. But in the other category where it is more dominated by the older generation, there is some training and learning. And, there's like that medicine versus vitamin sales tactic. Some of them know the pains of their legacy products and what it's causing, and they're looking for the medicine to resolve it. Some of them, they think what they're using is fine. They don't even, I literally talk to a customer, they're like, what's wrong with Excel? And, and then you start rattling off all these problems. Then like, did you ever have this? Did you have this? Did you have this? Like, yeah, we had that. Yeah, we had that. But we just built it into our business. I'm like, you don't have to. And so that's a vitamin sales tactic, right? You need to teach them, hey, there are better things that can help you with this ailment or prevent these things later. So I think it's a long-winded way of answering your question. I don't think it's unique to AI. I think it's just unique to the more progressive SaaS, technologies that, First Residence, Duro, and many of our own other peers are providing to the industry. Until that first modal culture fully retires, we still have to sell to them, and we still have to explain to them. It's just it's a different, experience.
You have that same view, or is your view coming from SpaceX and the broader manufacturing than just hardware?
Yeah. Look, I echo everything that Michael said, and the analog that comes up in my mind also is cloud. And not too long ago, there was a huge allergic reaction to the cloud in manufacturing. I think the pandemic, I still do believe that the pandemic actually, flipped a switch in the collective mindsets of people just out of necessity. But then people realized that, like you needed that pain in order to get on a solid vitamin wellness journey, to use Michael's analogy. And now people are on that. They understand that there's cost savings, things like that. I think we're still very early on in AI. Even our most cutting edge customers, kind of ironically, or at least I think it's ironic, will push back on, the boundaries that we're pushing in AI. But I always go back to the, kind of Henry Ford quote, right? If you ask the people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I think it's important for technology companies to take shots, to simplify things where necessary, and to apply technology to solve problems that customers are dealing with day in, day out, because they think that's just what it is. And in our world in particular, whether you're on that older side of the bimodal generation that Michael said, or even in the middle, I will say a lot of people have gotten very used to and even have been trained on a system that is showing its cracks with respect to cost plus types of programs and waste for waste's sake, frankly, and they don't even know. So what do we do about that, right? It's hard to just try to beat them over the head with it. I think it's better, more tactful, and I think this comes with some experience. Sprinkle it in, and know that you're doing good and helping make people's jobs better. Get that feedback, build that feedback loop into the product. And, just like any of these arcs that we've gone on before, we used to get huge pushback from our low code platform. We call it Ion Actions. It's basically, this is pre AI, even being able to code in the kind of logical function of the factory. So useful for things like preventing quality escapes and things like that. We used to get pushback. Oh, we don't know how to write code. Why don't you write it for us? What do you know about this? You should just program it in. We've been doing it this way. And then as soon as they have their first taste of the first Ion action and the flexibility they got with it, we have companies that have catalogs of 50, 60, 70 Ion actions that are written into their environment. And we believe that we're going to see the same thing with AI, if not even more exponentially so, right? So it's going to take a little while. The benefit that we have, it's a double-edged sword, is we get to see what's happening at the leading edge, right? How software developers are using AI, and what consumer applications are doing with AI. And then we get to work backwards into what can this look like in manufacturing, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now. And I think it's important to continuously lean forward, because as Michael said, if you don't do it, your competitors will. And I think for us in particular, if we don't do it in manufacturing, there's a risk that no one will. And we revert the entire system back to, I don't know. I don't like to go visit those places, but it is something I, hold very, is like very important to what drives me every day and why we're taking these bets on technology, taking us forward, not backwards.
So a slow ripple for you. It's a slow ripple, right?
Slow at first, and then very quickly is what we've seen in previous iterations of this. We're still very early on the AI side at First Resonance, but I'm very much looking forward to reporting back in about 6 to 12 months' time.
All right, well, let's do that. Let's have another one of these calls together. This was great. Really appreciate your time. I learned a lot. That was really cool. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Always good to talk to you guys.
All right. Well, let's do it again. And, good luck with the fourth quarter, because it's starting up pretty soon here. And great. It's awesome meeting you, Karan, because we didn't know each other. Michael, I look forward to seeing that demo someday. I'll take it easy. It was awesome. I look forward to doing this again in a couple of months, maybe.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for setting it up.
Likewise. Thanks both of you guys. Great discussion.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. See you next time.